Hello, my name is Dr. Anne Marie van der Zanden. I'm a professor of horticulture at Iowa State University. Welcome to the online garden design course. The title of the module I will be presenting is Starting the Landscape Design Process. This presentation will focus on how to get started designing a landscape. To do this, I will provide an overview of the design process. More information about how to implement the multiple phases of the design process will be discussed in more detail in other modules of this online design course. I will also talk about the broad concept of choosing a design style. And finally, I will talk about the 3 different use areas found in most residential landscapes and the ways these spaces are used and the characteristics that they have. When I first start talking about the landscape design process, I often use the quote from a BBC, the British Broadcasting Company, radio program I heard a number of years ago. The quote, "Planting a garden is like hitting something with a stick. It can be music or it can be noise," resonates with me. Landscape design is a process, and sometimes the end product is successful, hence the reference to music. Other times it can be less successful, in which case it is more like noise. As a designer, I think it is important to realize sometimes you will make noise, but other times you will make beautiful music. I've included this flowchart graphic to provide context for the overall design process and products. What I will be discussing in this presentation influences the design, but not specific items that necessarily result from the design process. The information identified during the site documentation process and the program requirements are ultimately combined to create functional diagrams, which are then followed by preliminary design, and then finally a master plan. This part of the design process will be discussed in detail in a separate module, as I mentioned earlier. I've included this graphic to illustrate that the overall design process is an iterative one and that includes multiple points to reflect and reevaluate on decisions that were made. First, you accept the situation and the challenges and opportunities created by the site to be designed. Next, you analyze what you have to work with on the site and begin making some initial decisions. Next, you begin defining the scope of work and determining what is realistic. This is followed by generating different design ideas. From this list of ideas, some are selected and then implemented into the actual landscape installation. And finally, once the landscape has been installed, it needs to be evaluated to see how it's doing. The graphic shows that at each step, the designer should reflect on decisions and make appropriate changes where necessary. Now let's focus on choosing a design style. Choosing a design style creates the basis for many of the future design decisions that will be made. Most often in residential landscapes, the style of the house significantly influences the design style. This modern style house lends itself to a landscape that has strong geometric shapes. It might also include a more minimalist planting style, which works well with mid-century modern architecture. The symmetrical architecture of a colonial style home can easily be translated into a symmetrical or more formal landscape design. This landscape shows strong symmetrical balance, with the walkway and front door being the central axis of the design. You can see that by dividing the landscape in half along the central axis, the plantings on the left side are mirrored on the right side. Even the sheared topiaries in containers next to the house and the sheared hedges reinforce the symmetry. Single-story ranch-style homes are ubiquitous throughout the American landscape, and although the architecture of a ranch-style home tends to be somewhat boxy, the single-story height allows for a full range of different design styles. Some designers will create strong visual contrast by designing large foundation planting beds with broad sweeping curves. In other instances, they will accentuate the boxy style of the architecture by using straight bed lines. In some respects, a ranch-style home lends itself to the greatest opportunity for different design styles. The next overarching concept to consider is determining how the different areas within a landscape will be used. Most residential landscapes have three main areas: the public area, the living or private area, and the service area. Each of these three areas have different functions within the landscape, and as such, each also has its own unique set of characteristics. To help people visualize this concept, I often liken use areas to the rooms within a home. For example, the public area is like a formal living room. The living or private area is like a family room. And the service area is like a utility or laundry room. The public area in the front yard of most properties is the space between the front of the house and the street. In this space, trees should be planted to frame the house. An easy way to do this is to plant trees at a 45-degree angle from the corner of the house. The image shows shade trees on the right side of the house planted at roughly a 45-degree angle. Shrubs with a variety of heights and shapes should be planted in the front, particularly those that are planted as foundation plantings adjacent to the house. This helps soften the transition from the rigid and linear shape of the house to the more natural shapes found in the landscape. The living area, or private area, is most often the backyard. This is a private space used by the client and not a space others will necessarily see. The rules, if you will, in this space are a little more relaxed, and the elements included in this space should be selected to meet the needs of the client and how they will use the space. Plantings in this area should be soul satisfying and aesthetic. Include plants here that really help increase the landscape preference a person will feel in this space. There should be some type of enclosure, such as a fence, plants, or a combination of both, to help create the walls of an outdoor room and provide privacy from the neighbors. And the materials used on the ground surface need to be selected to accommodate how the space will be used. For example, is there a need for a large turf area for kids to play? Or does there need to be a patio space large enough to entertain guests? And finally, this is where a homeowner can showcase their collection of garden gnomes or other types of garden embellishments. I liken these to the home accessories that really customize an outdoor living space. Please take a few minutes and look closely at the image on this slide and see how many different examples from these four categories you can identify in this backyard. I've included this image as another example of a living area in a landscape. I've highlighted the enclosures with blue arrows. These are a gazebo and a lattice fence. The home accessories are highlighted with the yellow arrows and include an outdoor dining set and a metal sculpture. You can see the plantings are an interesting mix of color, textures, and shapes. And finally, there are two different ground surfaces, each of which serves a different need: a solid stone patio for the dining set and gravel for the walkway. These are identified with the purple arrows. A final use area in a landscape is the service area. The key features of a service area include that it is screened from view, but that it is still accessible. No matter how lovely your compost area might be, it still shouldn't be used as a focal point of a backyard. The yellow arrow shows how a compost bin has been discreetly tucked at the edge of this backyard. It is still functional, but not out in plain view for people who might be sitting on the patio looking into the backyard. This brings me to the conclusion of this presentation on starting the landscape design process. In summary, this presentation highlighted the overall design process, including the different products that are created throughout the design process and how it is an iterative process. I also described how to choose a design style for a landscape and the influence a home's architecture has on that. And finally, I outlined the 3 use areas within a landscape, the function they perform, and the characteristics of each area. I hope you've enjoyed this presentation on starting the design process as part of the Iowa State University Department of Horticulture online garden design course.